the state funding that we'll get for the migrant population, and maybe you already said this, do you know how that's gonna work? Is it gonna be we get it ahead of time, nothing ever comes ahead of time, so I'm assuming no, or like how will we project the timing of that? Will it hit the budget that we don't have, you know what I mean? Like, will we have a timing issue of when we actually get those funds compared to the costs that we're gonna incur real time?
I think overall, ultimately, there are so many moving dynamics with it that June 30th next year will be a tight day.
And do they allocate the funds to where they have to go, or is it just a pool? You know, do they just say, here's $5 million, or do they tell you how to use it?
Those are great questions. So right now, as of today, there is not any firm commitment from the state on almost anything. There's some level of commitment from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, DOE, DESE, the state agency that runs schools, that they're going to pay $104 a day per child per day. As a manager, I see the memo go to schools, and Lucas updated the school committee, I think, last night. But until I see the money come in, I hate to break the news, but I can't count on any of that. I think ultimately, every school district and every municipality, if any costs are incurred, we're going to be working in a deficit spending model as opposed to seeing it up front. And trust me, Nicole, the camera didn't pick up your facial expression. That's what Amy and I look like every day now, is, huh?
Yeah, because I guess how do you, to your point, how do you allocate, like there's the school piece you can probably quantify, right, with the children that are in the school, but then the incidentals that hit other departments, right? How do you quantify the need? How do you know how much this increased population is eating away at police, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. So
Police
to your
have-
point, maybe it is a pool, like how do they, and we don't know right now.
It isn't. I mean, the state has not codified anywhere in law, or there's not been an executive order supporting the hotel motel tax. So from my standpoint, that's lost revenue. That's a 6% net per room, per night on the Best Western Hotel. Every town manager in Massachusetts that has a site is asking that question. And I'm just saying there has not been a piece of legislation filed or an executive order from the governor that has said you are 100% protected against the lost revenue for the hotel motel tax. Number two, relative to police and fire, is a little trickier because they show up no matter who you are, where you are, how you're there. Some of that is more of a billable issue if there's an ambulance run. We have not had any major incidents at the hotel. In fact, actually, it's been relatively calm. And then it's really, Nicole, just a lot about staff time. It's my time, Amy's time, the Board of Health, the staff going down there. The National Guard did get deployed today, so I'm hoping that somehow some of that relief comes off the local officials. But ultimately, to your really question, the two big issues we see is really about schools and really about hotel motel tax. And then any residuals in some of the tourist communities, they're worried about meals tax drops and some of the other little incidentals, but you won't know that until it happens. And that's kind of why I say, my guess is they're going to drag this out through the whole year, right? And then we're going to triage this throughout the whole year. Like I said, the governor filed a supplemental budget today for an extra $250 million in immediate aid right now just for food, okay? So we're talking about feeding the migrant population in the hotel statewide. I don't know financially in the state budget how that's all going to get dealt with. I have no doubt that every one of you will hear about it in the news on a daily basis, right? And so you all will probably know as much as I do, but there have not been any firm ironclad commitments other than the $104 per day per child, which is still like, I don't think it feels to us like it's out there and everybody knows that and here's the money. I think as Lucas updated last night, we haven't actually there aren't any students that are going to the schools yet, right? So I think they have to enroll them, find out their needs, what age, what classes they're going to go to, is there a bus? You know, every district is having struggles with bus drivers. You just literally can't hire them. You know, so I think there's so many unknowns. October 1st, for some folks may realize, the bigger concern from us is FY25, where October 1st, your enrollment in your district, that's how your Chapter 70 and Local 8 are determined for the following fiscal year. So if the school district saw 30 children by October 1st, that would then structurally be essentially baked into the education formula. But if students arrive after October 1st, A, what's the cost for this fiscal year? And then number two, what's the cost in FY25? And as I announced at the council meeting last week, the state has told, well, actually I shouldn't say the state has told us, the state has not told us this, the hotel manager told us this, that on October 1st, all 100 rooms will be filled by migrant families of roughly 3 to 5 people per family. So, you know, you don't know until the students show up, and we always play that, which we discussed many times in meetings, but, you know, if you're dealing with 30 students today, you'll probably see triple that. Well, if they come in October, November, December, we don't still know if the state's going to fund that with the 104 per day per child. And then furthermore, the state's going to have to change some sort of law in the formula to accommodate for those students that arrive in every district after October 1st in the next year's budget. And so there's, you know, I mean, I could sit here and ask literally 100 questions of the administration, and Amy could too, but it's all just seemingly a tough work in progress right now. So, you know, there's a lot of more questions than answers, unfortunately.
Do you know how many towns are impacted by that?
I think there's about 80, it's like 80 cities and towns. Yeah, yeah.
And then I guess, sorry, just thinking, and I can't recall if we talked about this, I'm still in like summer mode.
That's why it's an easy agenda today.
Yeah.
Just to,
we talk a lot about our shortfalls, and like again, like this is, I know we did this with the subcommittee, so it's very gloom and everything. Other towns they must be in a similar, every town's in this position, right? Like every town's talking about this. Like we're not the only ones, I imagine, right? Or do we feel like some of our surrounding towns, I don't know, do they have better money sitting around not being used? I doubt that, but I don't know. Like I guess I mean obviously we're involved in this town, so you're hearing about it, but I'm just curious. Like is it as dire all around us?
yeah, I think some are in a more challenging shape. Like the town of Westboro, I think, has been dealing with this since maybe June or July. And so you have, you know, cities like Chelsea that have certainly had hotels right from the start. So it's a mixed bag, but there are communities that are in much more dire shape, and then there's some communities where I'm sure someday this is just not a big deal. You know, it's really hard to say. You know, but I think every city or town that's dealing with this, you know, has some level of substantial impact. And by the way, just for the record, I have not heard of any major city or town, or any city or town that has had a hotel, you know, outside of a random, really selective few protests here or there, and outside of whatever everybody reads on Facebook, which everybody knows I do not have a Facebook account, and I don't read it because I don't want to read all that stuff. I think the overwhelming amount of people in this community and every other community is certainly very understanding of the situation and is peripherally supportive. I think where we're going to get into some difficulty, to your question, Nicole, is, well, what if you're North Attleboro and you've had a lot of flooding? And what if you are Easton and you have the worst PFAS problem in the state? What if you're in Leominster and you have a hotel and, you know, infrastructure I don't know how there's other things going on, right, that are driving up costs on taxpayers and driving up costs on budgets, and how those get refereed in every town is going to be a huge challenge. So I think it's not just this issue, it's this issue in context of all the other things that are struggling in town bills. And a lot of citizens, as we've seen at the council meetings recently, are just saying, hey, what the heck? You know, stormwater bills, sewer bill went up, you know, my taxes went up $400 this year, 2.5%. I think inflation's still inflation. I think we all would have hoped it would have come down by now, but it ain't coming down anytime soon. Interest rate, so I think it's just the potpourri package of it all, which is a lot of communities are going to struggle with. And in the course of Franklin, the financial challenge is really on the schools, as we've talked about for the last couple of years. And so I think that's where that issue is going to, come out, at least locally. But, I think I shared Amy's sentiment too. People are pretty frustrated with this. I think if the state was really backing this up, they would authorize the money they need to do it and give assurance to, I think, your question, and now, just codify it. Here's what we're supporting you on. So you can back us up, and I don't have to come to the finance committee in November and say, I got to slash the hotel motel revenue source by X dollars because the state won't back us up. That's, I think, where people are going to start getting really irritable, right? And that's when you're going to see the struggles, Nicole, in the other communities, the Foxboroughs, Mansfield, Plainville. Plainville, for example, has a hotel taken next to the casino. So they're now losing theoretically gambler revenue, unless, so they're losing other revenue sources that are funding their services in addition to just the hotel. Here our profile is pretty diverse. And as you've all seen, sometimes things are higher, sometimes motor vehicle exercise, sometimes we can balance things out. But if you're in a more touristy community or one that's based off Gillette Stadium or one-time things like that, these can have bigger impacts than just that.
Bill, did you have a question?
No, actually, my question was answered by Jamie House. I do have another question, however, since we're talking about this, and this is just for information. Could the state, or would the state, ever decide to shift migrants out from one area to another area, dependent on?
I don't see any reason why not, because I think it's fairly factually correct if that's what the state of Texas is doing.
Right.
And I think the state of New York, the city of New York rather, are busing people out of New York City up to other areas of New York. Mm-hmm. So I have to assume that can happen. And I think, too, I do know the state has been pretty forthright. For example, immediate migrant families had to be put in a hotel, for example, without kitchenettes, or even worse, without any food preparation kitchen at all. And so their priority has been trying to get a roof over the head and then move those families when they secure a site that have kitchenettes, like the Best Western, suites, and then also to areas where there's a food service component, where there's breakfast preparation and room service and stuff like that. I think they're trying to do the same thing with hotels with sprinkler systems and safety, to try to be better with safety and stuff like that. But I don't think I tell anybody anybody doesn't already know. There already was a housing crisis for affluent Massachusetts before this. And if people can't afford homes here now, I don't know. We lost 125,000 people in the last 3 years in the state due to the cost of living. So I hate to look into the camera and look like I got my eyes wide open, looking like I don't know what to tell you, but I don't know where people are going to eventually live. I don't even know if there's enough sites, like with kitchenettes, fire, with the basic public safety services and kitchen service. I just don't know, because I don't know the state, but I think they're working on it as best they can.
I just have a curious question. Where are these people coming from? Are they coming from Texas or Florida, the two obvious political ones? But they didn't poof appear. They were somewhere before.
So I won't go through the definition of migrant. The superintendent spoke to this last week, and he did a great job. But we used to call that more, just for illustrative purposes, more transient, right? So it's somebody who's transient, not the traditional visual that we have of homeless, but probably been living in multiple sites throughout the country, doing what human nature tells you to do. Survival, do the best you can for your family, your child, I think, so folks are from, I think, a variety of different countries, but I think a lot of the folks we see have been living in the United States for years, And I think, as documented well by the Boston Globe and the New York Times and other newspapers and the governor and the administration, is, I think people generally know that Massachusetts is a right to shelter state. And so if you're trying to find a place to live, I think that's probably one of the higher percentage places. And so I think there's at least migrant families are absolutely aware of that. And I think that's why you see some of the influx. But you have a variety of different countries, most from South America, Latin America, Caribbean nations, right? Dealing with civil war, horrible weather, political strife, so it's tough to identify. It's been slow rolling, and we've been able to, with site visits down at the hotel and from other colleagues of Amy and myself, we've at least been able to try to kind of figure out exactly some profile of where people are from. I think, unfortunately, image-wise, we think of something different than what it really is, and that's been a stigma that's been hard to get away from. But these are generally homeless families and transient families and individuals from throughout the country. So I think it's from all over the place.
How does the state determine where to locate these families? Like what towns and how they do it?
I think
Can
it's
towns say we have too many, no more? What is the?
I wish I have no idea the answers to any of those questions. We've been asking the same ones. I think the state is trying to do the best they can with the situation that's in front of them, and they really are. And with the influx of 30 to 50 migrant families a day, that's a half a hotel, right? So you got to find another site every day, every 2 days, or let's say every 3-4 days, the state has to find a new hotel. And I don't know where the end is in sight. It might be January. Even New Englanders hate the weather here. So I got to imagine others might not like it either. And so I don't think the administration can answer all of those questions at this time.